Welcome. Thank you. It's good to see all of you in here talking about survivorship, a topic that is very important to me and near and dear. So I'm glad that you are joining us today. As we mentioned earlier today, this morning, just a bit ago, this session is really important. I want the speakers here today to really express what they're doing in their space. If you have your own survivorship story, I think that's important. But the big point of these breakout sessions is not only to begin talking about the objectives in the Minnesota Cancer Plan, to look ahead to what's needed in the coming years when we put together the next 2025 to 2030 plan. What are the objectives and topics that need to be talked about? And we were very conscious on putting together these breakout sessions on what are the inner workings that can help change the cancer community and landscape in Minnesota. So I really want this to be an integrative session where you ask questions, you feel like you're part of this conversation. A note from a tech side, we will make sure, not for karaoke hour, but please, if you do have questions, we'll have you speak in the mic just so the speakers can hear. And at this point, I would love for the three of you to introduce yourselves. Tell us where you're from, your connection to survivorship, and we're going to build a really great conversation today. So thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Kaya Verich, and I'm the Survivorship Program Manager at mHealth Fairview.
Hi, my name is Lily Taylor, and I was diagnosed with cervical cancer at the age of 27.
Good morning, my name is Shaniqua James, and I'm the Program Director at Gilda's Club Twin Cities.
Thank you. So when we begin, I would like to first talk about survivorship initiatives. Also, even the definition of survivorship. I know in my almost last 20 years in serving the cancer community, one of the definitions that I have given oftentimes is patients identifying themselves as a survivorship from day one of diagnosis. Other survivors saying that we identify that at the point that cancer is not recognized anymore in tests and imaging. What does that mean to you as your definition of survivorship, and what areas are you involved with creating innovative spaces for survivorship needs?
I can start. So survivorship to me, so I can tell you my experience with cancer, my connection to cancer really is my mother and my grandmother. I was 9 when my grandmother passed away from breast cancer, and my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. It metastasized, and she ultimately passed away in 2018. So survivorship, in my definition, is a little different, right? I feel like people have the autonomy to sort of define whatever they feel like it is, and I support people in that. So I've had people tell me that survivorship to them is just sort of making it to that point where cancer is no longer detected. Or I have people that are actively in treatments that say, I'm just trying to survive, right? Like that means that I'm in survivorship. So it really depends. And I allow people to share their experiences and define it however they feel fit, whatever fits for them. And so I can tell you at Gilda's Club Twin Cities, for those of you who are not familiar, we offer free social and emotional support for anyone impacted by cancer. So really it is the whole family. And that can look like support groups, whether weekly, monthly. We offer healthy lifestyle classes like yoga. Cooking is one of my favorite because I love to eat. Social experiences, all kinds of different things. So that's how we sort of support that survivorship for people.
So at mHealth Fairview, we really look similarly from diagnosis all the way through the end of treatment. Earlier, survivorship could have been described as those treated only with curative intent and at completion of treatment, but now we're looking to expand that role or that definition and be very inclusive of all patients regardless of where they are in that cancer treatment journey, and making sure the real emphasis is around identification of those unmet needs. So certainly we've got the acute care team managing those day-to-day toxicities and complexities associated with treatment, but it's those conversations about the unmet needs a patient is experiencing, and then getting them connected to those services, whether it be our internal supportive care resources, or connecting them with the external community-based resources closer to where they live.
Yeah, I don't really know how to answer that. So as a survivor, I guess I could tell you like things that I'm going through as a survivor, if that's okay. So as a survivor, some things that I'm battling is just constant fatigue, and like the fear of recurrence every single time there's a small pain in my pelvis. Survivor's guilt is a huge thing. I knew a Korean woman when I was going through cervical cancer that actually passed away about 4 months after I had my official remission. So living with that every day. I'm extremely lucky because I don't have a ton of lasting side effects from treatment, but I know other women that are dealing with neuropathy, kidney failure, diarrhea, chronic pain. And then there's a lot of confusion over our hormones and cycles, ovulations, and things like that we just can't seem to get answers for. So we're coming together, we're kind of not complaining, but venting about our issues, and then we don't really have answers for these issues. Sex is also a really big thing as a survivor, especially for me in cervical cancer. Something, that used to bring me joy and love now absolutely terrifies me. So understanding how trauma deals with that. My husband and I have been going through marriage therapy, been doing that weekly for like the last year and a half, but it's definitely taken a toll on our marriage. And we just got married, so to have to go through that now too is very difficult. Yeah, I think that's what I want to say about that. Yeah.
Well, Lily, I think that you bring, first of all, thank you. You bring a really important perspective to this conversation because, as members in the community, whether it's nonprofit or the medical community, we can't do our work without listening to you. And so, your vulnerability and trust in sharing those needs is how we can all do better. So it's important that your voice is heard, and we're really glad that you're here and that you're sharing your story today.
Yes. Thank you.
One of the things that you just spoke about, speaking to survivor's guilt, speaking about the woman who had died, a Korean woman that died 4 months before, I think a lot about what does providing patients' voice with diversity and making sure that other patients and survivors and caregivers see people who look like them and identify with them. That cultural component is really important. I was hoping Shaniqua and Kaya, if you could speak to how you build your programs and make sure that the members in our community, it's not just a generalized, this is what we do, because geographically that shifts. So how do you look at survivorship programs and needs in Minnesota or the Twin Cities area?
I love this question. So I actually started at Gilda's Club a couple of years ago, and one of the big things that I noticed was the lack of diversity, right? Like not only the people that we're serving, but geographically and a whole bunch of other identifiers. And so I really love being in the community. Like that's my thing, right? So one of the ways that we make sure that we are diversifying the programming, that this is how I build my programming too, is making sure that I'm in community, asking those questions about, okay, what's the actual need, right? Like what is it that you want to see? And I do that whether it be with research, partnering with the U of M, right? Like we currently have a rural health disparities project that we're working on with the U of M, whether it be me like going to churches and talking to people who are impacted by cancer in these communities, and really like sitting down and having these conversations, because I don't think that I can like make these decisions and build the programming and hey, they'll come, right? With my little desk in Minnetonka, right? Like that's just not going to work. So a lot of intentionality goes behind that, right? So having those conversations, asking the questions, making sure that I have a really good understanding. And then also, I think there's a little bit of complexity with it because I am a Black woman, right? And sometimes my own experiences as a Black woman can sort of interfere with that and might bring out my own biases. So making sure that I'm in check with that as well, especially my cancer connections. So that's sort of how we do it at Gilda's Club, making sure that we're intentional with like asking the questions and being in community.
And Kaya, what does Fairview look like?
And so if any of you have had the opportunity to look at our survivorship.umn.edu website, that's where you're going to find a really great example of the programming that we're doing. So this is the patient education that occurs outside of the clinical care portion of it. And that's where we have free programming available to all comers, whether they be patients, caregivers, health professionals. And what we do and what we've really been allowed, and Shaniqua made the comment, if you build it, they will come. We've really had that success through partnership. It's with the University of Minnesota, their community outreach team at Masonic Cancer Center, and then the clinical side, which is mHealth Fairview. We've combined our efforts from the patients that we serve, active patients, then to the community outreach efforts at Masonic Cancer Center to try to reach all those various communities. So Liz is sitting here, and she's got a great team that's got connections within the community. And so we do some direct mailings and outreach specific to those groups that are not always well represented. And then within our patient side, we have been considering doing some really specific targeted outreach to some of those groups that aren't fully represented, because we've got people that come and there's a lot that of a certain group that like to participate, which is wonderful, but we know that we're not always reaching all the people in our community that we should. So just the ongoing effort, reconsidering how we're approaching, where else can we look to find some additional opportunities to get in various communities, et cetera.
And that actually is a perfect segue. Dr. Cunningham spoke about the need for interpreters, but also the level they play in reaching diverse members of our community, understanding cultural needs. So I'm curious, and Lily, I'm going to come back to you, but I'm curious from an organizational and system side, what does that look like for how you consciously integrate rural communities? What does that look like currently? Are there future plans? And then how does that look like from a space of diversity, whether it's translation of materials, use of interpreters, learning styles?
Want me to start? Okay. So we're a small nonprofit, and so obviously I have to be mindful of the costs related to some of like these interpreter services and like the translation services. But for all of our support groups, there's a mental health professional that facilitates it, right? And for the longest time, it's been a barrier because there is such a decrease in mental health professionals. Not only mental health professionals, but mental health professionals of color that speak different languages, all of the above, right? So it's really difficult to find that diversity for the people that we're serving in terms of like our support groups. And so one of the things that we've consciously done is sort of open that up, right? Like we've let go of that barrier for people having higher degrees, specifically in mental health, to be able to facilitate our groups, right? And say, hey, we can offer you this training for free. And we can, send you through this training. You'll be able to facilitate our groups as long as you are able to meet the needs that we currently have. And so that's one part that we've done, right? So we've been really intentional about hiring facilitators that can speak Spanish, right? Hiring facilitators that are really well connected within different communities that we do want to serve. Specifically for the rural community, we are making no assumptions, right? Like we are asking all of the questions. And we are not making the assumption that we will be able to provide those resources, right? But that's when we make the connections with resources that are already in these communities. And if there needs to be like some sort of coalition, like just being really intentional about making sure that we're able to provide the resources and the services that people need in these areas. I think a lot of it is going to be fundraising, specifically for like translation and things of that nature, but also like finding volunteers that can do some of this work, right? Again, I come from a framework of looking at it from a whole person because I'm a social worker. So I like to look at every part of a person in different parts of their lives. So I'm asking all of the questions related to not just like your cancer diagnoses, right? I mean, because people are diverse. And cancer is always in addition to other things that you have going on. So so again, just continuing to ask those questions, again, really intentional about like my hiring practices, making sure that I understand the needs of communities and going into communities, making sure that, that I just get it in that way. And if I don't, I'm asking the questions. I'm not pretending to know everything by any means. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. At mHealth Fairview, our footprint of cancer care really ranges from Hibbing and Grand Itasca all the way down south to Burnsville. And then we've got the east-west distribution of Princeton is, I think, technically our furthest west, and then Woodbury, Maplewood on the east side. So while we are a very heavy metro-based facility, we know that many of our patients do come from rural areas to receive that higher level of cancer care. And so with our Hibbing and Grand Itasca folks, they're very active in all of our programming and our service line meetings around survivorship. So just listening into their needs. What do they know about their patient population that might be look a little different than it does for a metro-based population? And then the other thing that, again, taking on to what Shaniqua said, is about asking those intentional questions. Part of the work that we're doing within the care team is some RN care coordinator work standardization. And so that really allows for structured, formatted questions about living, transportation, what their, again, those unmet needs are. And so we're in process of building that across all of our care sites. So the folks up in Hibbing will be asking those same questions of their patients as the folks that are in Minneapolis. And so we can get then from those direct conversations with the patient a better understanding of what those needs are. And then hopefully, right, be able to translate that to getting them into those services, again, whether they be internally based within the healthcare team or getting them connected in their community. Mm-hmm. The other thing that is always ongoing at the University of Minnesota is research around these survivorship needs in various populations. Dr. Helen Parsons is here, and she's currently involved in a project around AYA, the gaps in adolescent young adults and leukemia. It's funded through Leukemia Lymphoma Society around financial toxicity associated with that population, knowing that they're very transient and have high needs around survivorship. And that's actually been turned into some legislation as well as some ongoing research for that population. So all those things combined, we're just trying to help advance that care forward.
Can I add to that a little bit? One thing that I just thought about while you were talking, I was like, yes. Right? Like also going into the communities, it can be difficult to penetrate, right? Because you're a stranger sort of coming in and asking all these like questions, right? Even though these disparities exist. So I think one thing that has helped me to be able to do that and really like start to diversify our programming is making sure that I am being my authentic self and making it known that I do not know all the answers, like you are the experts, and then also consulting with people who are a part of that community to make sure that, I'm not going and offending someone, right? Like, because there might be something that shows up differently for me in my culture than for someone else in their own culture. So
thank you. Lily, I'm excited to hear you talk about what your perspective and experience has been on either being connected with community organizations, education and resources within the clinics and treatment centers you have gone to. What does that look like?
It's I feel like there's some work that is needed, but it's good. I know that I've gone to a good sex lessons from the U for things like that, but it does still feel like it's a different age group, it's a different race, it's a different group that I keep going to these survivor things, and I'm not seeing people like we talked about that look like me. I'm not seeing younger people, and so I'm just I'm happy that things are happening, but I'm excited to see where this could be and where it could diversify and get to the younger people. So yeah, I know that there's a lot of organizations and good things out there. But it's good to have minorities out there and just showing up and being able to, be there and yeah.
And I think you made a really great point is the younger population. I think oftentimes nonprofit community cancer centers look at how do we engage a younger population when we also look at survivorship needs, knowing that there's that long-term impact that they're starting to talk about more and put language to so people don't feel isolated and alone. It's also making sure that as more younger people are being diagnosed with cancer, that there is a space for you. I, in the last couple of years, have been working really closely with educating multidisciplinary care teams on making sure how do all members of your care coincide and work together talking. And a lot of that has to do with being resource driven. A lot of that has to be done with asking the hard questions to the patients and bringing up questions about intimacy, bringing questions about financial related concerns, bringing up questions about long-term survivorship needs that we didn't know about, whether it was neuropathy or things aren't talked about until one person mentions, and then everything starts to open up. And one thing that we especially saw during COVID was the way that some of these forums and community programs on a national level started impacting community level, because it did bring groups of people together that had similarities, which is really important. But it's still making sure it's that patient and caregiver advocacy component of when you go and speak to your healthcare team, that you're bringing those questions up. Oftentimes patients and caregivers are not comfortable with that. So it's that stigma of waiting for your healthcare professional to ask those questions. And if they're not asking those questions, does that make the patient and family feel worried that you're the only one feeling that way? Have there been areas that you, Lily, have voiced and talked to your care team about wanting or needing, and how has that been heard or approached?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I had a Dr. Teo, if anyone knows her, for my oncologist. So I had her, and I kind of cried to her and said, I feel so alone. I don't have anyone to talk to. And she really helped me become the advocate that I am today. She took time out of her schedule to go to lunches and coffee with me to get me to do things like this. So I felt really heard from her, and that was great to have that. But I do understand what you're saying too, that it's this weird stigma where we don't want to feel like a burden. And there's a little bit of Minnesotan in us too, where we want to stay quiet. So just teaching, I think like Dr. Cunningham said, like that relationship, and just making sure that the patient and the doctor relationship gets really, I don't know what the word I want to say, I've lost it, but just making sure that happens is a big deal. It's a big deal to us. So.
Yes, well, thank you for that. And I want to take the last 10 to 15 minutes to ask all of you, again, having engaged conversation, the three of you as panelists, I love. You have a direct patient perspective that we can ask. You have health systems, and then you also have a community nonprofit. So would love this opportunity for people to ask questions, talk about what you're doing, how we're here to create change, what this space looks like. And I will pass the mic around as needed.
I won't be shy. Okay, so in one of my previous lifetimes, I ran my hospital's comprehensive breast program, and that was many years ago. And even then, the issue about sexual health post-treatment. And luckily, all the surgeons, everybody knew me. I knew all of them. So that happened at the breast center. And just very recently, again, it came up. I can't remember what group I was with, but that it's still not being addressed. I want to see a standard of care, whether it be oncology nursing, because that's the platform I operate from, or other platforms, that it's a standard of care. This is about being a whole human. So when you talk about, Shaniqua, looking at the whole person, this is something that gets lost. And even in California, where a lot of people spent a lot of time in hot tubs, still it wasn't talked about. So that's what I'd like to see. So if maybe you could respond, if that's really a standard.
Yeah, absolutely, and great discussion. I think the one hope, and if folks here are knowledgeable about either Commission on Cancer or NAPBC, that's the National Association for Accredited Breast Programs, from a program perspective, that's really offered us the ability to shift, right? Before it was so heavy on the care plans and the counting and the subtracting. And so now with these accreditation driven requirements, if you will, for programs. It's about how do you talk to those, and specifically NAPBC, how do you talk to breast cancer survivors about those changes and what are those unmet needs? It doesn't specifically call out sexual health. It talks about diet and exercise, but it didn't specifically call out sexual health. But the good news is that it's coming, right? That you can understand, or you can see that those accreditation bodies are really pushing healthcare systems forward to evaluate those services. And so Commission on Cancer, on the other hand, now we've got the ability to really do some deep dives on who are the patients that are being referred to these supportive care services, whether it be nutrition, whether it be cancer rehab, for example. We can see when and who and how, by department, by provider, by disease team, and then when in the patient journey are they being referred, so then we can translate those into quality projects. So that's really been exciting from a program manager perspective. And then from a clinical perspective, we actually just have a new PhD. She is our long-term survivorship follow-up clinic practitioner. She's a physician's assistant, and her interest is going to be in sexual health. So research. She's also doing clinical visits, specifically in breast cancer. She won't do pelvic exams, and she won't do like prostate patients, but right now in the breast cancer space. And there is a sexual health clinic as well at the university if folks are seeking. Abby Gerard is her name. She does the counseling, family counseling for sexual health concerns. So there's hope. There is hope. We're not there, but we're getting there. Thanks for the question.
Just kind of going off of that as well, I think what we do often miss is people do not know how to talk about sex. And so even if you integrate it into programs, you have to do the training so that people are comfortable. I mean, just in general, we don't talk about sex, right? We don't talk about sex even with our partners or our friends or anything. And so I think really that is what is missing, because people also then don't want to ask the questions. So
yeah, and I could just comment on that too, is that we really found post-COVID, all with the loss of a work home, loss of connection with your peers, staff transitions in that period, all supportive care services, just knowledge about, gosh, do we have that program? Are we available? And, this is just basic. So I think part of our system work as well is going out to all the various healthcare teams and doing that education on, these are the services we have under our cancer care program. How are we going to get you the education that you need to talk with cancer survivors around that? Yeah, so we really did see a void. And, we hear that on the patient side then is, oh, I wish I knew you had a dietitian. I wish I knew you had a social worker. And that's just devastating to hear when our clinical teams are so heavily focused in that acute management, but how do we as the program plug up those holes on the underside to get them the support that they need? And that really starts with education of our healthcare team.
So this is fascinating for me. I'm actually a survivor of about 3 years. I finished up my radiation right when COVID started through the mHealth system. What I think would be super helpful, so when I first got in this system, a nurse went to, took an hour or two and did this long checklist. Lily's nodding her head. Okay, so when I finished, I got like a little certificate. Oh, you're done with radiation. And I'm like, that's it? Hello? I've been seeing you guys every day for... So like a survivorship checklist, or like, I don't know, something similar to when I started. Mm-hmm. What are your needs? Da, 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 da. And that, I don't know how to call that out or how to integrate that into a system. And it's, obviously bigger than Fairview. And I appreciate getting lost in the COVID world because the nurse managers just retired. Like they were just like, forget it, I am out of here, right? Dropping like flies. I think I had 3 of them in 3 years. So anyway, just to consider somehow that same intensive process that you have for intake for cancer patients, for, I don't know, outtake or whatever you want to call it.
Is there a question here?
Yes, I can understand. It's Lily, I can understand what you're talking about. I was 29, diagnosed with breast cancer. And so there was none of these places that are out here now. There was nothing. And so I had to advocate for myself because they kept telling me I was too young to have breast cancer. And I kept pursuing it and kept pursuing it. And so once I pursued it, and then they found out, they're like, oh, but you're not 40 years old for a mammogram. You're not old enough for this. I said, but I'm old enough to get cancer.
Thank you for sharing that, and I hope you keep sharing things like that because as survivors, we need to hear that. And yeah, good. That's awesome. Congrats. Congratulations. That's huge. That's huge. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I am a survivor as well, and I would like to touch on what you kind of had said. Also, a nice thing to know would be the aftermath of this, like you talked about, the survival guilt, the anxiety every time you have an appointment or every time something's wrong, you get sick. How to kind of cope with those things, I think is really important for them to share with someone who is going through that because it's a whole new chapter that opens up. Yeah.
Kaya, I wonder too, can you speak from a health system side? Oftentimes a nurse navigator in an oncology setting role, what does that look like from the intake and the outtake? You know, there's a very strong correlation of post follow-up care and what that looks like for the patient journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So absolutely that nurse navigator. And at M Health Therapy, we really keep that role very limited, if you will, to that earliest initial diagnosis or potential diagnosis into that first treatment visit. And then it's the care coordination role. But that transition, that immediate after treatment ends, into that next 3-6 months, we know that's a place of extreme vulnerability for a lot of reasons. You're not seeing your people every day anymore. You've lost those frequent visits with your physician, and then you're just out there in the community and you've got your certificate. So now what? And so that's where we really look, we know we need to do a better job at having patients have that knowledge about available community resources as they're building up to that transition point, so that when they're finding that next way forward, that's a place they can look. Some of our programming at that survivorship.umn.edu, we've really taken this feedback from our audience and tried to address those most commonly asked topics: nutrition, mental well-being, activity after cancer. And so we've got these resources available on the website where folks can go and, whether it be 10 o'clock at night on a Monday or 6 a.m. on a Saturday, if you're really seeking that information at that time, that's a place where you can watch some pre-recorded sessions to get some idea of what to move forward next. And then the last piece that I'll just touch on a little bit is that survivorship care plan. So there is a process, not as intense as that intake, but it should allow a cancer survivor to have a treatment history, so the summary of treatment, and then the second portion of that is the follow-up care plan. What to expect, the late and long-term effects, what these next 3, 6, 9 months might look like for you, and then that resource portion. Where can you go if you're looking for some additional information? So if you've not had a survivorship care plan or you're still seeking one, ask your care team. They should be able to provide it. That's part of the Commission on Cancer work, is encouraging all healthcare systems to be providing that. And then there's also those late survivorship visits. So if you're looking for a practitioner, and again, M Health Fairview has one, that not that immediate transition period, but when you're in that 4 or 5 year period out of surveillance and you want to have one more comprehensive look at everything that you went through your diagnosis and treatment, as you're kind of discharging back to primary care or out of cancer care surveillance, there are some late survivor specialists that would be able, and I'm happy to talk offline more about that as well.
Thank you. I think that you speak really well to the fact that the patient still has to reach out and ask, but there are ways and there are programs and systems built within that can guide, but really making sure it takes that community perspective. It goes back to, what does the primary care provider's role have at that 5-year post-mark 2 as an integration of care with the multidisciplinary team, from radiation to oncology to organ-specific area. So thank you for speaking more to that. I want to give an opportunity for one last question before we move on to the next breakout. After the last session, or after the last question, I would love our 3 panelists to have a takeaway moment for final thoughts.
Sarah. I just want to put a plug in for this wonderful document. I lead a team of oncology nurse navigators at Allina Health, and talking about all the things that patients may not know they need or want to have access to. This document, which is out on a table out there, we give that to all of our patients because there's just amazing support and resources. My question is for Lily. In regards to talking about all these things that might happen to a person going through cancer care, what recommendations would you have for clinicians to help start those conversations or start talking about those things that maybe you want somebody to bring up versus you bringing up? Or like, what have people done for you that have made that conversation easier to get the support that you needed in any aspect of your life?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, just having doctors talk slowly to me and taking that time to even be silent for a minute or two to let me answer is one of the biggest things, because it feels so rushed at every appointment. So if they can just slow down the way that they speak and really give me time to think, that just changes right there. It changes the entire mood. So yeah.
Thank you, Jessica. That was a great question. Final thoughts and takeaways as you're holding this space, and comments that you either want to share, questions or needs that you have, so all of us can be open to listening and changing.
So one of the common themes that I heard, with each person's question is like there needs to be some sort of like bridge to care from your treatment at the clinic back into community, right? Which is something that Gildas wants to focus on. And just so you all know, we do have what's called a post-treatment group as well, right? I think in order for you to get those resources and a way for you to advocate for yourself is to like speak aloud about what your needs are. And joining support groups like that is a way that you can do that, right? Because people have similar experiences, and we talk really openly and vulnerably about some of these issues that you brought up, especially sexual health. And I think that's how you'll get some of your needs met, because the health systems move like molasses sometimes, right? But that's okay. We're working on it. But those immediate needs that you need in order to be able to talk about some of these things really are in your community organizations, right? So just asking your care team about, okay, what's out there, and just being aware in that way and advocating for yourself in that way.
I just want to say thank you to Minnesota Alliance and to both of you, everyone here. Just being in the Survivor Breakout is great. Just letting me and survivors have a voice is a huge thing. So I just want to say thank you so much for that. And I have a lot of hope. As like we have younger survivors or just survivors in general that are speaking up. I have a lot of hope that things are going to change. So.
And I want to actually echo both of those, the gratitude for being here today and with the panelists and to the people within mHealth that continue to support this work, but also that hope. There's so much opportunity within health systems, within cancer, within community, just to do a better job in general, right? It's about, talking with patients, finding those unmet needs and getting them the help that they need. We've got opportunity to expand that definition of survivorship so that we're touching patients regardless, or not even regardless, but wherever they are in that treatment journey, There's some really exciting work Pam Mason is going to be talking about around the caregiver experience, bringing them into the full picture so that from this topic or this specific topic about reducing the anxieties, we know how intimately those caregivers are involved. So how can we better incorporate that into the full care of the patient? And then all the technology and the resources advancements we can do, there's just endless opportunity. And so really gratefulness and hope for future.
Thank you. Kaya and Lily and Shaniqua, thank you for being here, and thank you for all joining us today.